Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is daughter of Yisrayl, Abel, Maya Hawkins. I would love to serve you as a priestess starting very soon. Please find your seats for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is daughter of Yisrayl, Abel, Malia Hawkins. I want to serve you as a priestess starting very soon. It's an honor and privilege to introduce to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl, Abel, now entering the sanctuary. I now turn it over to the great priest of the House of Yahweh.
Shalom, everyone. You can be seated. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to go over a quick review of what I went over the last time, and then I'm going to lead into the current prophecy which is taking place right now. And the first thing that I wanted to bring out was that I had done a gematria on a scripture from the book of Yahweh. If you could have show my slide, please. And it's from 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 22. And Ilya was explaining that he was the last prophet of Yahweh. And I put in, like Ilya, Yisrael alone is left of all the prophets of Yahweh, but the prophets of Baal number 4,199 men. Now, what I came up with in the English gematria was 8304, and it comes from 8280 and 3050. And 8280 means power. It means to prevail. 3050 means Yah. It's the same as Yah, which is Y-A-H, and it's the sacred name. And we know the sacred name is the name of our Father, Heavenly Father, Yahweh. And the Kohans and the overseer have brought this out more and more and more deeply than I can even do right now. Now, what I wanted to do was I wanted to let you know that Yisrael Hawkins, overseer of the House of Yahweh, is the last day's prophet that Yahweh has ordained to bring forth all this information so that we, especially us, the women of Nu, are ready for what's coming. And I wanted to continue on in the prophecy of the measure of the temple. And if I could have my next slide, please. Now, what I was giving you, I gave you three different things that was taking place. The peace treaty was signed into action in 1993. The temple patent was filed also in 1993, and the Vatican Accord was signed with Israel in 1993. And if you notice, the date that I have circled is in 1995. The patent was actually granted on 8/1/1995. Now, the reason why that date is so important is because the patent was filed and the House of Yahweh was given the patent through the United States government before the Jerusalem Embassy Act was put into effect during this same year in 1995. Now, the president since then, I'm going to read this. This is from the prophetic word, which is the August 2019 prophetic word, and it's on page 3, and it says, the first half ended with the president choosing not to sign the Jerusalem embassy waiver. Okay, so what that means is the president at that time President Trump did not sign the waiver on 12/6/2019. Now, the reason why that is so important is we know that the peace treaty was signed into action in 1993. We know that it was shut down in 1997. We also know that in 1995, Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated the same year that the patent was granted to the House of Yahweh for the Third Temple. And also the same year that the Jerusalem Embassy Act was signed into action. It was actually signed into law by the Congress. The president did not sign this act. He allowed it to sit on his desk for it to go into effect without his signature. And he did that for a purpose, because they didn't want to move the embassy to Jerusalem during all of the turmoil that was going on at that time. So they created a waiver. The waiver was signed for over 20 years. The presidents of the United States have signed that waiver preventing the Jerusalem Embassy Act from going into effect. Now, this is a quick note. If I could have my next slide, please. Okay, now these are the 3 dates that I was talking about. If you look on the screen, is 1993 was the peace treaty, 1993 was the founding of the Temple Patent, 1993 was the signing of the Vatican Accord, and in 1995 the patent was granted. Now, in the Strong's Concordance, 1995 means, let me find my paper, I actually did a research on it, 1995, may have to come back to that. Okay, 1995, from the Hebrew. 8 means destruction. Number 1 is a primitive word, father in a literal and immediate sense, which means father, principal, or patrimony. 81, which is you put the 8 and the 1 together, means powders. 80 is from the root of 79, and it means dust and powder. And 1995, from 1993, means a noise, a tumult, a crowd. Now, these numbers are not on that paper. It's just something I wanted to go into. Why I wanted to bring this to your attention for right now, Trump had declared 2017, that he was going to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, now this is what has gone on since then. Okay, in 2017, on 5/24 of 2017, Pope Francis met with Trump, and at the end of the secret meeting with Trump, Trump said to Pope after his meeting, "I won't forget what you said." Now this was 5/24/2017. Okay, right after that, the Pope met with the leader of Turkey, and that was in February of 2018, and he met secretly with Turkey. Okay, the Pope met with Trump on 5/2017. Trump says that he's going to move the embassy on 12/2017. He moved the embassy 5/2018 after the Pope met with the leader of Turkey. Okay, he signed the last waiver for the Embassy Act on 12/2018. 6/2019 was the finalization of that waiver, and it says in the thing that it was when the peace treaty, the last 3.5 years of the peace treaty, went into effect. Turkey has invaded Syria. The Kurds have gone to Damascus. Turkey has, in their country, 50 U.S. bombers that are nuclear capable. They have a pause right now in this time period for 5 days. When that 5 days is over, what is Turkey going to do to Damascus? And with that, I'll turn it over to the next leader.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. Shabbat Shalom. So continuing on with the topic of the city of Yisrayl, and I know we're all very excited that Yahweh is revealing it to us in this time period through our great overseer. Yahweh is forming a city of Yisrael just like he formed the great house of Yahweh. And remember, he's forming it like he formed Yisrael Hawkins from his mother's womb. He formed the earth, the heavens. He put so much detail into it, and it's shown in the book of Yahweh. That word formed, it's Hebrew number 3335, and some of the meanings is form, mold, fashion, purpose. So we see Yahweh foretells of all that he purposes to do in the great book of Yahweh. But right now, he is at this time promoting his house as being the one and only work of Yahweh on the entire face of the earth, and also before the universe as well, before heaven. And that's the seventh trumpet of Revelation 10, verse 7. And we can turn there to Revelation 10:7 on page 977, and it reads, "But in the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, when he will begin to sound, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets." So we see there the trumpet. It's also the prophesied trumpet of Moshe 3:7. So we can go there to Moshe 3:7 on page 696. Let's start at verse 6. "Will a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Will iniquity fostered by religious impostors be taking place in a city, and Yahweh also not have a righteous work there?" And verse 7, "Most assuredly, Father Yahweh will have no other work other than the work that he has prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets." Now we know all the details of Yahweh's work. The great priest for the past 4 years, and also over here on the women's side, have been running these things through the matrix, the different names and different addresses and stuff, and the numbers that come up. If you've really been paying attention, you'll see the tag numbers and the addresses, the phone numbers, the addresses of where the House of Yahweh actually first started in Abelin, Texas. And I'm pretty sure there's much more that they're going to be bringing out on this. It actually gives you the physical address of the first newsletter that Yisrael Hawkins put out in Abelin. The prophecies show where Yahweh's work is going to lead to. There's no detail that's not shown. Yahweh foretold all things, and it all involves a great city called what? City of Yisrayl in Yisrayl, Texas. Okay, and I know that we're all waiting for our great overseer to show us where in Scripture this is mentioned. He's been showing us piece by piece, because every work that Yisrael Hawkins has put out so far has all been named and mentioned in the Scripture, without a doubt, at least since the days of Abraham. It's been named and mentioned. So let's read Isaiah 34:16, because this ties into it as well. And we all know the Scripture very well. Isaiah 34:16 on page 551. Okay? "Search out the book of Yahweh and read. Not one of these will be neglected, for it is written, Yahweh is their shepherd, they shall not want, Yahweh is our shepherd, for his mouth has commanded it, and his spirit has gathered them." You know what Yahweh is actually saying there to all of us here at the House of Yahweh? He's saying that we will not fail. When he says not one of these will fail, he's saying we will not fail. He's saying, be true to me, uphold my righteousness, build my house, build my city. And you know what his promise is? I will be with you forever. Forever, throughout all eternity. So let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verses 15 through 18. And this is one of those scriptures that I think in every newsletter, prophetic word, blog, anything that Pastor writes, you can find this scripture in there. So we'll read verse 15 first. "And what harmony can there be between Messiah and Baal? Or what share does a believer have with an infidel?" Verse 16, "And what agreement does the house of Yahweh have with the gods, Elohim? For we are the house of the living Father, as Yahweh has said, I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their Father, and they will be my people." And verse 17 is actually a command and a law. "Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh. Do not touch the unclean thing, and I will receive you." Verse 18, we see here another promise from Yahweh. "I will be a father to you, and you will be my sons and daughters, says Yahweh Almighty." Now, in verse 15, the King James Version uses the word concord. There is no, and what concord can there be between Messiah and Baal? We know that there's no concord at all between Yahweh and Baal. That word concord in the Greek, it means agreement, accordance, together. So in other words, what unity is there between the Messiah, his house, this last day's work, and Lord, Bel? There's none. That Lord Bel, that's the world that our overseer has told us to keep ourselves clean from and get away from, come out from, and start working on getting ourselves out of the world totally. Because he's worked so hard to cleanse us away from the shadow of death that's out there when we go out there. If the House of Yahweh offers a service here, especially if we live here at Abel, use it. There's no need to go out to the world to get that uncleanness all over us and bring it back to this sanctuary, to this city of Yisrayl, and spread that filth to others. We should be getting ourselves out of this world totally. Praise Yahweh. And then the promise to us is that we'll be Yahweh's sons and daughters. He will be our Father. And with this, Yahweh bless your understanding, your determination to do so. Please stand. I'll turn over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Yahweh's peace be with you. How are y'all enjoying the feast? I don't want it to stop, but okay, so the title of my speech, or this section, I actually have a title, surprise. What is man? What is man? Now, I want you to put under that 1074. And for those who don't already know, 1074 is the car tag on the Last Days Anointed Witnesses van. And Yahweh's gone to extreme lengths to point out the importance of this number because it's found all over in the scriptures and in the Gematria. So what is man? And I have 3 questions that I want you to think about. What separates man from all of Yahweh's creation? What separates man from all of Yahweh's creation? How are we being made in Yahweh's image? And what is Yahweh's plan for man? Reading from Psalms chapter 8. How excellent is your great name in all the earth, Yahweh, our sovereign King. Look into verse 4. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? One of the books that I'd like to read out of is There Is Someone Out There book, and it's the House of Yahweh publication. You get it at the South office, just call them up. And it says, the plan for mankind is to come to perfection in righteousness as Yahweh is perfect in righteousness. The plan for mankind is to come to perfection in righteousness as Yahweh is perfect in righteousness, and to be given authority over all Yahweh's creation. That is Yahweh's plan. It is only Yahweh's plan. It is not the plan of the serpent or the gods. It is only the plan of the one and only Creator, Yahweh. You must understand how Satan, that old serpent, has deceived the whole world, and why? Because she doesn't want mankind to have that authority. So what separates man from all other creation? Overseer has told us that man was created with a subconscious mind. We have the ability to choose, and not like all the other creation. So reading also from There Is Someone Out There book, it says, when Yahweh created mankind, it was in his plan for mankind to be in his image. And then that word image, in the Strong's, it's 1823, and it means resemblance, manner, similitude, and it goes to 1819. And it means to use similitudes. So meaning that mankind has the ability to make choices. So beings made in Yahweh's image means converting to Yahweh's character. However, Yahweh's creation of mankind is still not yet complete. In order for mankind to be in Yahweh's own image, they must become like Yahweh, right? I was thinking about the importance of the linen garments, and we've gotten so much valuable information about the importance of the linen garments. And I want to bring to remembrance, when you put in 3.5 years in the Gematria, one of the numbers comes out to 949. And guess what that number means? Linen. It means linen. And it finally clicked. I was like, okay, so in that time period, that's when the linen garments were going to be granted to the saints of Yahweh. It was in the Gematria. The prophecy was in there. Isn't that amazing? And Yahweh willing, the next time I speak again, I'll also bring out, and if you want to do it in your spare time, you put in the date, the first day that we were granted permission to wear the linen garments on Yahaqob 15, 2019. You're going to be blown away by the definitions that pop up. But going on, I wanted to read the definition of man. Man in the Strong's 376, number 376 in the Strong's. Man, a man as an individual, husband, people, steward, somebody, and someone. Now, I want you to listen very closely. It's a synonym for Adam, and it connotes man as the creature created in Yahweh's image. Get this, the crown of all creation. Hallelujah, Yahweh. So, as always, I put that in the Gematria. And in the Gematria, crown of creation comes out to overseer's tag number 1074. Praise Yahweh. That is absolutely amazing. So, what is man? The crown of creation, the one that is going to be made exactly in Yahweh's likeness and image, perfect in righteousness as Yahweh Himself is. And they're going to be governing all the universe. And we get to be a part of that. Praise Yahweh. So like I said, if you want to look up Yahaqob 15, 2019 in the Strong's, and Yahweh willing, I get to bring some of that out because I got more on that. And if you'd all please stand. Yahweh bless your Sabbath. I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated, and let's make the peace of Yahweh be among us. So has everyone finished their assignment that the overseer gave us 870 days ago? On 6/1/2017, you don't remember? Pentecost, when the overseer said that when he presented the 16th book of Israel to us, the Sea of Glass, he said we needed to search out that number 16 to see what it meant. Well, at the first Gematria I have in here, the dedication, it talks about a tell of vision. And it says here, as you look at that Gematria, and when Yahweh showed his holy prophets, such as Daniel, visions of the last days, they actually saw and heard Israel Hawkins, 828, Israel Hawkins, reading to them the very words they would later write. So we see that the Gematria backs up what was written in the 16th book of Israel. So I'm finished with my assignment, and so the title of the speech is Holiness with Contentment. In 1 Timothy 6:6 it says, but holiness with contentment is great gain. The number 16 in the Strong's Hebrew means in the sense of bending toward, sort of like prayer. To breathe after is number 14, to rest content without protest. Sundown on 6/1/2017 was 8:41. Why is that important? Because in 1 Timothy 6:6, what I just read to you, that word contentment is 8:41. Is Yahweh not amazing how he can put that number in to mean the sundown time also? It means contentedness, contentment, content. It goes to 7:14, to be content with food and clothing at this feast. Food, the righteous, holy laws of Yahweh, the words of Yahweh given to us as we're granted to wear the holy linen garment. It also means, I have another Gematria, which I put up, just rest content, to see what that means. And see what we need to rest content in is the 613, the laws of Yahweh. And those other two numbers, if you have time, that 918 and the 153, all together those numbers mean who has the power to mend the breach. Is that not what Israel Hawkins is doing? To mend the breach? In the Greek, in the Greek 142, it means to expiate sin. Yahweh raises up so the branch can be fruitful. In the Greek, 16 means well-doing. It goes to 17, a well-doer. It goes to 18, that which is righteous. And then it goes to 4160, to bring forth, to band together, content. And when I think of that banding together, Yahweh brought us together as a family. I have no other family, and I want no other family except the righteous sisters that I have here in the great house of Yahweh. So the next gematria is, I just put in the 16th book of Israel. And you're going to see the numbers 1938, 1980, and 330. We'll go over them just quickly. 1938 is the majesty of Yahweh. 1935, superior power and position. We've been learning the position, the greater position that we will have as daughters of Yahweh. The most desirable tree, because why? We're trees of righteousness. Let's go on to 1980. Now remember, this is the year on 12/2 of 1980 was the dedication of the mobile sanctuary here at the house of Yahweh. It means to walk, and it takes us to Genesis 17:1, meaning where Yahweh said to Abraham, I am Yahweh, walk in my ways and be perfect. So he's showing us at this time, Yahweh was telling him as he put the sanctuary up, walk in my ways. And then the Hebrew 330, fine linen. And I have two gematrias for that. Fine linen is even mentioned in our assignment that we were told to do. Fine linen. So let's look at that next gematria for that. Chosen to be arrayed in fine linen. And you'll see that the tag number of Pastor's van is 322. Is that one coming up? Arrayed in fine linen. 322. And then right after that, we have another one, man dressed in linen, 1074. But not just 1074. Do you have that one? 1074. But 512, and we know 512 is Yahweh's in full control. So all this while Overseer was starting the house of Yahweh, dedicating it, Yahweh was in full control. Let's go on to the Greek. The 1938 means to crave, to set your heart upon. And we know that he only sets his heart upon Yahweh. It goes to 1980, to inspect, to select, to go to see, to relieve, to visit, with the help of Yahweh. Yahweh helped and guided Israel Hawkins ever since he was in the womb. And it goes to 4649. It means a watcher. Now, isn't that Yeshua, where he was commissioned to behold the branch in Zechariah 6:12-13? Because Israel Hawkins is the branch who is building the house of Yahweh. And it went to 4629, clothing. Again, clothing came up in this here. It went to Timaeus 6:8, and having food and clothing, let us be content. Did you hear how many times we went over the word content? And 303 means to flourish, to revive, new again. The house of Yahweh was brought back after 1900 dark years of deception, and it was brought back. One more thing I need to show you, and I have a slide here, is in 1983, on 2/4/1983, the house of Yahweh was recognized by the IRS, established as the house of Yahweh. And Israel Abel Hawkins came to Abel in 1967. When you minus out that, it was 16 years later that the house of Yahweh was established. Do you not think that Israel Hawkins rested content when the house of Yahweh was established in the chief nations of all nations according to prophecy at that time? Praise Yahweh. Let us turn it over to our next speaker.
Please be seated. Shalom. So I wanted to show you a book right now, and I wanted to tell you that I thought Pastor was just joking when he said that this was selling on Amazon for $900 and $1,000. I thought it was just a joke until I Googled it this morning. All of you have smartphones, I know. You can prove it for yourself. He wasn't joking. One was going for $1,100. $1,100. I could see why when you see what's inside this book. And we're going to cover a little bit of that today. In the second book of Israel, chapter 2, in verses 30 through 34, Yahweh, through our overseer, told us exactly what we were created for. And I want to read this to you. In verse 30, it says, I brought this out in Genesis, where Yahweh created you in a special way. I've also brought out that Yahweh put different environments in front of each one of us, because each one of us is different. That should bring us right to the peaceful solution. We are different. We have different personalities. We come from different backgrounds, right? He created us. He created different environments and sent Malachim to protect us from harm and danger. Did you know you were being protected before you even came here? Until he got us to his house, where he could train us to come to perfection. You're a long way from it now. Sometimes he says we're 99.9% there. But here he said, you're a long way from it now. And you'll see this as we get deeper into this sermon. You'll see it more that you are a long way from perfection. This was in 1990-something. So I want you to get the time period here. But if you will get there, you will get there. He was sure of that. He said, if you'll work at it. Work at it. That means that's something we have to do. Verse 31, he created you in such a way. He didn't create the Malachim in this way. There's nothing in the scriptures that say he created the Malachim that they can do what we can do in the fleshly body. He had to create you lower than the Malachim in order to build character in you, and in order for you to suffer from weakness or sin. When the Malachim turn to sin, I do not see any possible way in Scripture that there's any turning back for them. I don't see where they can build their character to where they can decide against this thing and overcome like we can. We can actually overcome and build our character that must be built to get into this kingdom, or even to receive eternal life, which is even lesser down the line. In fact, eternal life is way less down the line. And he was talking about Genesis 1:26 when he was quoting that in the second book of Israel. Now I want to read from the Unveiling Satan book because he gives us a little bit more there. Pastor Israel Hawkins, he gives us here a little and there a little in order to help us to build our character. And on page 339 in the Unveiling Satan book, and it's under Lucifer gave up her position as wife of Yahweh to be a god. And it says, just as the meaning of Yahweh's name displays his perfect righteous character, so does the meaning of the word God display the character of a god. We know Genesis 3 verse 5, right? Evil as the gods. But what does this mean? Pastor says the true scriptural meaning of the word God shows it to be a mixture of righteousness and evil. It also shows selfishness. Now here at the Feast of Yahweh, when we're building our character, what is the one theme that you've heard throughout this feast? Yell it out. Serve, yes, you got it. Which means that none of you here have the character of the gods. Because that's a character. And it says, selfishness and the desire to exalt yourself over others in a sense of gratification and undeserved glorification. Now I want you to think and really keep in mind undeserved glorification. Because Yahweh promotes those who serve. Does he not? Throughout the book of, you can see the men and women in the book of Yahweh that Yahweh held up as being righteous servants. Now in the same book, I want to jump over to page 356 because it talks about, it says Isaiah 14:12, fail, and we know that Satan's kingdom is going to fail, and it talks about Yahweh's plan. And I'm going to begin reading here. It says, the Holy Scriptures show plainly that Yahweh's plan has always been to build a righteous family. Now, I know I've been trying to bring out in my speeches about the adoption, and I know many of the other speakers about the adoption process to become a part of this family. This is a family of servants and slaves. It's a family that, yes, you don't mind humbling and humiliating yourself for others. Are you willing to do that? Because in Matithia it says, if you're willing to do this, then the kingdom of Yahweh is yours. It's an attitude of above or how can I serve you? What can I do to make your day better? How can I make your life easier? Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. It's trying to get beings like himself, beings with the highest standards of righteousness. Highest standards of righteousness comes right after the sentence where he said that we are to be the servants and slaves to all. So in the world, highest standards of righteousness, yada, Pope, pious, holy. But that's not the way that Yahweh's kingdom is formed. Now, there's some criteria that are necessary in order for this family to be built. And I want to show you this on page 357, and it's going to be on the screen. It says, since character cannot be created, but it must be developed, certain criteria are necessary in order for Yahweh to complete his plan to build his adopted family. We need the body of law, the 613 laws, statutes, and judgments. We need training, which is a time for each individual to be taught by our greatest teacher that he has given us, and to time to develop this righteous character. It doesn't come overnight. Testing. Oh, this is the one nobody really likes this part. Testing, which is opposing competition in order to test each individual. Do you feel a little struggle sometimes? Yahweh wants you to feel that struggle because you need to be able to stand strong throughout all eternity for this kingdom. So you have to be tested. He has to prove that no matter what, you will choose the body of law that you received from the training in this testing. And then the last one is sealing. A 6,000-year time period in which to select, choose, and seal a proper number of bodies of individuals who have developed through those things, that criteria, this righteous character. Praise Yahweh, great saints of Yahweh. We can do this, and we do this with one another. Serve one another, love one another, help one another. Be those righteous servants. Praise Yahweh. If you'll all please stand, I have the great opportunity to turn it over to the great priest in Yahweh's house. Praise Yahweh.
Praise Yahweh. It is a blessing to be in Yahweh's house, is it not? Praise Yahweh. At this time, we get to hear from great deacon Michael Austin.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Please be seated. We're going to move rapidly on this search. I encourage everybody to go back and listen to Pastor Yisrael's sermon on Adam and Eve, because we're going to be going into great detail about what the codes has brought out about Adam and Eve. And have your pencils and pens and paper ready, because there's some $4 words here that I had to look up. I didn't even know what they meant. And a lot of science words came up. So let's get right into it. Okay, so we have here. All right, so of course the first thing that came up in the main search was Adam and Eve, right there. Adam and Eve. And now when I let the search just go and see what was in there, the very first thing that came up was created bloodless. That was the absolute first thing that came up. Created bloodless. Okay? Then we had Abelin. That had come up down here. Abelin. How we have it spelled on the front, on the front gate, the sign. Okay, then right here we had creation. Creation. Now this next word, right here, okay, this word right here, number 6, is the word coalescent. And coalescent means coming together to form one mass or whole, as in a body, becoming one. Coalescent theory is a model of how gene variants sampled from a population, such as the body of Messiah, may have originated from a common ancestor, mankind coming from one man and woman. So number 6, that was coalescent. In other words, it's one gene or many genes coming from one man or one woman. Okay? Then the next one, let's go back to the code. Okay. Then right here we had appointment. And Adam and Eve were appointed to do the work. And Adam was also appointed to do a certain work, which I'll get to here at the end, or actually a little bit more into this. Okay, so that's appointment. And of course, House of Yahweh. House of Yahweh was right there. Over here we have laws of Yahweh. Beit Yahweh, it was here. And then we have Debar Yahweh right here. Laws of Yahweh. Now this was interesting. And I'll just tell you what they are. We have manufacture and mechanization. Mechanization. Now don't think of that in worldly or earthly terms as in like manufacturing a radio or something like that. Think of it as using the microbes to manufacture and create a being or create something for the work of Yahweh and what we're going to be doing in the kingdom. Okay, so back here, manufacture, mechanization. That's a tough word for me. Okay, now this one, I had to go to my supervisor who's trained in electronics because this one came up and I had to keep going back to him because I wasn't understanding it. But what this word right here is, and I still don't understand the application that it would be applied to us. So it's called meg-ohm. 1 million ohms. Now an ohm is something that resists a current. The simplest of tests used to detect breakdowns in wire insulation is a megohm or the Megger test. Okay, so megohm, it detects breakdowns in wire insulation. So there must be microbes or something there that detects when people start turning away from Yahweh in the connection to Yahweh that cuts that connection off. Okay, so let's go back. In 13, we had messianic. Messianic. Now this next word, again, is another big word. It's right here. And it's called nomenclature. And it's the devising or choosing of names for things, especially in a science or other discipline, the body of system of names in a particular field, i.e., in other words, the nomenclature names of different molecules that make up a human body. And here's one example right here. And it's basically all the names for all the different parts. That's an example of nomenclature, naming different parts. Or if you should see like a diagram of a car. You know, it shows a diagram of the car and all the different parts named in there showing that's nomenclature. Now, Adam, as I said, his appointment was to name the animals. And that's when I finally realized after talking to my supervisor why that, who helps me greatly on this stuff as well as my counselors, why that word came up, because Adam named all the animals, which I thought was amazing that that word would come up. Okay, this word I thought was really, this was special. And how you apply it, I don't know, but the word P-A-V-E came up, all separate. Pave. So how that applies to Adam and Eve, your guess is as great as mine. So pave came up, which I thought was really, really wonderful also. Now, this last one, okay, it's all in this group right here. This word here, let's see if I can, pernicious. And what that is having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way. Connected to pernicious is, okay, sin produces or yields blood in a gradual, subtle way. Sin is a harmful effect to mankind. It's a harmful effect to a bloodless being. And when you start sinning, the body starts producing or yields blood. Sin produces, yields blood. Now, some of these other words that came up, and they were marked, but because of no room, I just wrote them down. Empyrean, relating to heaven or the sky, heaven, in particular, the highest part of heaven. And what I thought was interesting is the example in Google was the Empyrean domain where Yahweh's will and human will become one. The highest heaven. Okay? Then we had elucidation, to explain, to make perfectly clear, elucidation. And then there was elevate, electrify. There was also chaining, as in DNA. Chaining as in DNA. Called. Called crosses the names Adam and Eve. Called. Bisect, to divide into two parts. And we know that Eve was made from Adam. Atomic. Okay, here's another one of those $4 words. Apotheosis, which is the highest point of development. The highest point of development. Think about the subconscious mind here, okay? Malachim, mapping, as in DNA. Merge, and merge crosses bloodless. And the last thing to come up with all these science words was microscope. Microscope. I encourage you to go back and listen to Pastor's previous sermon on Adam and Eve. Familiarize yourself with that. And also pay attention to the rest of the messages still coming. We have some great messages coming, especially about Jupiter and the wonderful things that are involved with that, and they're going to take place after the 100-year period after the millennial reign. So if you'll all please stand. With great joy and honor, I have the privilege to turn over to a great priest in Yahweh's house from Alaska, the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Yahweh's peace be with you all. Please be seated. Okay, let's go ahead and just put up that title slide and get right down to it. It's called The Builders, Architects of Deception, Part 3. And if I can have my first slide, I want to draw your attention to a newsletter that Pastor wrote just a couple moons ago, the 2019 newsletter on page 6, where he told us that the adversary is a group, troop, kingdom, and organization. It's not just one person. Okay, the adversary, and you've been seeing in the last couple sermons regarding how it's collective, it's an association, it's a group, it's a troop, it's a kingdom, it's an organization, it's a complicated structure of people and organizations. So I put that in the Gematria, and you'll notice there's two numbers that came up the same. That should immediately draw your attention to something. 3348 in Hebrew means to obey. In Greek, 3348 means to have a share of, participate in, partake of, be a member of, belong to. Now, both of those especially belong to and obey. That should draw your mind to Romans 6:16. So you put in, do you not know that to whom you yield yourselves as servants to obey, his servants you are to whom you obey, whether of sin, which leads to death. Now, we're not going to put obedience in there because this has nothing to do with obedience or righteousness, so we leave that out. And notice what you get. 1433 Masons. And when you add up the numbers in 3348, double it, you get adversaries, 6696. So showing again, Pastor, you know, it's like, can you imagine the mathematical calculations that Yahweh had to do when his lips move like that? When this man writes with a pen? Do you understand the trillions upon trillions of calculations that Yahweh had to have done prior to all of this to make that come out just like that? That should boggle your mind. You know, you should see that Yahweh knows every hair on our head, and he's in full control of this whole situation. So I left off last time, and I told you we're going to show you who's inside Jupiter, right? Can I have the next slide? Let's type in who is inside Jupiter. The first number, 233, means beginning, of old, or ancient, and now. Right now, at this time. 1398, or 233, the second number, 1398, from 1397, means warrior, mighty. From 1396, to be strong. Remember, a Roman means strong soldier, right? Mighty, conducts himself arrogantly. Confirm, strong, prevail. Now, these words should remind you of this beastly system. And the second or third number, 2268, you've been seeing this the whole feast. From 2267, an association, company of bad priests, spell, band, charmer company, a Babylonian magic, enchantment, a society, a secret society. From 2266, to unite, be joined, form an alliance, to join a league, to tie a magic knot or spell, and to charm. So again, it goes back to 2266. You've seen that all this feast regarding this association, this troop, this organization, this kingdom. When you add up those numbers, you get 3899, and it means to consume, do battle, fighting, make war, battle, devour, overcome, and prevail. That's who's inside Jupiter. Let's go to the next slide. We took all those meanings there. You drop them in the Gematria, and you get 4468, the first number, and it means kingdom, dominion, reign, royal power. From 4427, to become queen or make queen, as in queen of heaven, the queen of Jupiter. You know, that word heaven is synonymous with the word Jupiter, by the way. You can look it up in Strong's. Strong's Greek 4468 means unscrupulous, mischief, cunning, love of a lazy and effeminate life. From 4467, meaning rascality, villainy, reckless, easygoing behavior, lewdness, crime. From 2041, work, deed. And there we go again. That number comes again, that 2267, or 2778, it should say. That's that last number there. It comes from 2267, and it means an association, company of bad priests, and it means this league, to be united, to be joining in an alliance. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not exactly what I was going to show you. Here's where the number 2267 comes up. I'm sorry. Now, when you look under those three numbers, you're going to you see those little numbers under each number there? You see a 22 under the 4468. You see a 6 under the second number, and a 7 under that third number. So you put those together, it's 2267, and that's where it goes to 2266 again. You know, those are called lower denomination numbers. When you add up 4468, you get, 24, 2 and 4 is 6. 448, 614, 822. So 22 is what you can reduce it to. It's a reduction number. That's where those numbers come in. You can use those too. You should be watching for those when you do the Gematria. So anyway, when you add up all these numbers, you get again that 6696, meaning the adversary. Assault, besiege, From 67:36, an image, idol, an idolatrous image, beauty, idol. Now this next slide, I don't want to show it yet. I want to show you how totally amazing Yahweh is, because Yahweh's about to reveal to you that it's been under our nose the whole time. In Revelation 13, you know, where it talks about that first beast in Revelation 13, 1 and 2. And pastors told us in the mark of the beast from the very beginning, that's speaking of the first empire, the Roman Empire. But Yahweh's going to prove it now. Can I have the next slide? Okay, when you put in Revelation 13, 1 and 2, and you add, I'm not going to go over those numbers today, but when you add up those numbers, you get the number 7315. 7315 means on high. On high. Did we hear that the other day? A couple days ago, didn't Pastor leave off with that on high? And he told you that meant Jupiter? Well, notice something else. It looks like it says Rom, right? Do you notice the phonetic spelling of that name? What you're supposed to pronounce it as? Rome. 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 Now, how much more obvious can that get? Any questions? There shouldn't be. You should be simply amazed at what Yahweh is showing in these numbers, in these hidden secret things, this hidden manna that he's hidden for this house in these last days. So he's showing the very word Rome. He's showing you who that is. Now it's from 73:11, to be high or exalted, to rise, became proud, defiant, haughty, rebelled, turn. By the way, did you know the word universe means that same thing? The word uni means one, as in unicycle with one tire. And that word versus means to turn. Turn. The ones that turn from Yahweh. Okay, the ones that turn and their kingdom in Jupiter. Let's go to the next slide. Because it's speaking of this one here. I can only find one picture of her in all of creation ascending. Remember, she says, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. I found that on page 234 in Unveiling's Lucifer. Because you can't, any other picture you look for on Google, it'll be a man with long horns. This one's a female. Now notice, I will ascend, 666. I will be like the Most High. Let's look at the numbers here for that. 241 means broadness. That's a synonym of Catholic or universal. From 238, to broaden the ear, to expand. We'll go into these other things later. 241 in the Greek means of another race. Yes, they're of another race. Not the 1074 race, but the 666 race, or the 1674 race. The second number, 1446, amazingly, here we go again. Masons. Masons. Satan was the first Mason. Didn't Pastor tell us that? The first one to say, I will be a God. I will be a God. I will do this. A self-glorification. Now it's, you will become a God. You will become a God. You will become a God. Strong's Greek 1446 means from 1576, the east, the other side, beyond, alienate, alter, provoke to anger, rage, raiser of taxes. That wouldn't be pastor in the city of Yisrayl, right? Won't be raising taxes. To meddle, turn away, wayfaring man. Remember the Masons, the wayfaring man that wandered from the east, the beginning. From the third number, 1424, from 1409, fortune troop. Fortune troop. Remember Isaiah 66? They make offerings, they offer drink offerings to that troop. That's Gad or God. And it means from 1464 to assemble in troops. Let's go to the next slide. Now, hopefully none of us here want to be superior minded, thinking we're above others. You know, I will be above the stars of Yahweh. I will be greater than everyone. I'm greater than all you priests combined, you all a bunch of stupid idiots. I'm so smart. I'm smarter than every priest in the house of Yahweh. You know, somebody said that one time. And it wasn't too long ago. I think it was in 1994. Superior-minded, the glorification of self. Okay? Let's look over the glorification of self. 234 is lady, queen, mistress. From 1376, Lord, master. From 1396, strong, mighty, conduct self arrogantly, act insolently, behave proudly. 1404 is the second number, and it means dragon, a fabulous serpent, the devil, a seeing one. Remember that all-seeing one? The eye on Jupiter? It's also somewhere else. I'm going to show you in just a second. Strong's Hebrew 674 means treasury revenue. Like as in the Treasury Department. Let's go to the next slide. Now, our current dollar bill that we use has the 1 on the back, says 1 on the back. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born on 1/30/82 in Hyde Park, New York. Roosevelt became the 32nd president of the U.S. in 1933. Okay, and I'm going to skip down in the underlined portion. It says, Franklin Roosevelt was initiated into the Fraternity of Freemasons at Holland Lodge No. 8 in New York on 10/10/11. 18 years later, he became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason and later a noble in the Cybers Shrine Temple in Albany, New York, and a prophet of the Tripobed Grotto, whatever, Mavpur. Roosevelt also made honorary Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Georgia and the Order of Demolay, which Walt Disney was also a member of. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was called from labor. That's what the Masons call this work. They call it the work, the great work, just like we call it the work. Remember, there's two races running side by side. But he died on April 12, 1945. Okay, now, isn't it amazing how he became president in 1933? I'm going to show you why. Can I have my next slide? That's because D.C. is controlled by Jupiter. You see the temple of Jupiter in the background there. We'll get to that in another sermon. It says, D.C. is controlled by Jupiter. The first number you get is 279, and it means brother of mother. You know, the other day, the great Kohan that does the news, he showed the popes, you know, the Pope Francis and Pope, or the one of the 10 kings, and they were hugging. And it said, and Pope Francis told them, I fraternally bless you. I fraternally bless you. It's right, it's a fraternity. It's a universal fraternity. You see that? 1966, which means Hillel, Lucifer. It's a universal fraternity, a brotherhood of workers for Satan, Masons. Now, Strong's Greek 279 means unrepentant and impenitent. It's used in Romans, talking about in the book of Romans, the first chapter, speaking to the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, how they were unrepentant and impenitent and stubborn. Now that 1674, the second number we see here, the math, you remember how it comes out in Roman numerals 666, and it's 666 is built into that number. It's the number of Yada. Maybe one day I'll go back on that and we'll look at some more on that. But notice the third number, 1934. Now, why would that number come up? Isn't that pastor's birth year? 1934, the meanings that you need to know today is become, continued, labor. Now think about this New World Order. Remember how the New World Order, they were building that New World Order in Genesis 10 and 11? And then Yahweh put a stop to it? But he said, after this, nothing will be withheld from them. After this. Well, after what? Well, after the birth of Yisrayl Hawkins in 1934. It's from 1933, and it means to fall. Remember that word labor? Remember it said Roosevelt went to sleep from his labor? Next slide. Let's look at this a little further. This is pastor's words. He says, this is from the 12th book, chapter 13, verse 35. He says, but in Jeremiah 23, we see in verse 14, it says, I have seen in the prophets of Jerusalem. These were not Yahweh's prophets. These were fighting against Yahweh's prophets, and they told Jeremiah, don't prophesy to us in the name of Yahweh anymore, or we will kill you. Remember the men of Anathoth? You're going to hear more about them too. Those men of Anathoth that threatened to kill Jeremiah for using Yahweh's name, just like the Masons do today from San Angelo. Remember, that was the first attacks. Don't use that name of Yahweh or we're going to get rid of you. And they tried to kill our great overseer, but the gates of hell will not prevail. Now, he says, don't prophesy to us or we'll kill you. That's the Masons. That's the Sodomites. They were alive and active at that time and building their group of people with the seeing eye or the all-seeing eye, which traces, as you know, look on a dollar bill and you can trace it all the way back to Egypt. Now look at this dollar bill depicted down here. Now what you're looking at this is FDR or Franklin Delano Roosevelt's actual signature down here. It's pointing at it, FDR. He's the one that approved this dollar bill. Remember, he was a Freemason, but notice FDR told him, well, we got to make a change on this. Because you notice the eagle or the phoenix is on the left side instead of the right side, which it is now on your dollar bill. Because FDR was a very super geopolitician. That man knew everything about what I'm telling you right now. He knew where this came from, and I'll prove it to you in a later sermon in his own words on tape. But he said, you need to put that pyramid over on the left side because it came first, before America, before the Second Roman Empire, which he knew it was. Okay, now, so you notice he just told them to make those changes, and he approved it in 1934. Now, isn't that amazing? He approved it the very year Pastor was born, became president the year that Pastor was conceived. Because you know why? Because the New World Order and this, not a new world order, it's the world order from the beginning. Remember what Yahshua said? There's nothing new. There's nothing new. Let's look at the next slide. I showed you this in 2015, and I might have shown it to you in 2016, but on that pyramid, on that dollar bill, when you take the Roman numerals for 1776, as you look at the right-handed depiction, if you put like the MDC around the first pyramid, the CLX around the second one, and then the XVI over the third one, around the third one, at the top, it comes out to the 111 or the 7, or, when you add up the base numbers, which is 666, and then the top numbers, you get 777 at the top of the pyramid. Well, who do you think that 777 is over that pyramid that they're working toward establishing? It's the kingdom of Jupiter. That's the all-seeing eye of Jupiter, who's watching over their endeavors here, their labor. I'll prove it to you. Jupiter is called, from study.com, the king of the planets because it's named after the king of gods, Zeus. And it's the largest planet in the solar system. So put in King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and you get the number 777, because that's who's up there looking over their endeavors. And then Zeus, the King of Kings, when you put that in Gematria, the first number is 226, and it means sign or mark, like as in the mark of the beast. The second number is 1356, and it means fallen from Jupiter, or Zeus. This third number, 1186, means Baal, Lord of the habitation, or Lord of the heavenly habitation, Lord of Jupiter. Strong's Hebrew, 1446. Look down here, Jupiter, the king planet. 1446, Masons? I'm going to leave you with a thought. Yahshua, when he was taken up, and it said that Satan told Yahshua, I'm going to say it now, I'm going to prove it to you in the numbers. Satan told Yahshua all these, and he showed Yahshua all these kingdoms, remember? In a moment of time, it says, in the blink of an eye. And she said, all this is mine, and I can give it to whom I will. I'm going to prove to you that this Mason was trying to get Yahshua to sign a Masonic oath. Okay, I'm going to prove it to you. It's no different than it is today. Remember how they tried to get Pastor to sign that Masonic oath? And Pastor said, no. He said, I can prove, it is written. The sinner that sins will die. It's in Yeketskia. He said, that's a lie. We don't have an immortal soul. I'm going to prove to you that Yahshua went through the same thing. But for right now, I'm going to move on. And may everybody please, could everybody please stand? It's been a great privilege to speak to all of you. Keep rejoicing. It's a Yasam feast. It's going to get even better, believe it or not. And at this time, I'd like to turn this over to a great priest in Yahweh's house, the great Kohan Yehuda Hawkins.
Shalom. Please be seated. The presentation I was asked to do today is a little different than what I thought it would be, but it's got some interesting things, so prayerfully everybody will have a great time, studying it. If you please turn to, I got the wrong one up here. I get the page. There we go. Turn to page 705 in your book of Yahweh, or if you have a Bible, Micah 4:7. His real name was Micaiah, but in Micaiah 4:7 in the book of Yahweh. But if you do have a Bible, it's Micah, M-I-C-A-H. And we will read this here. We have heard a lot of things about the temple and Zionism and things like that, and they make it look like it's a horrible thing to be a Zionist. They make you look like you're a terrorist or a nutcase, whatever. But that's just because nobody knows what that word really means except the house of Yahweh. The scripture reads, "And I will make her that was lame a remnant, and her that was cast far away a strong nation." And of course and the woman is spoke of in Revelation. The remnant, the branch, all that is all tied into this. And cast far away a strong nation, a group of people that Yahweh calls out, not paying any attention to color, race, or their background, as long as they repent and follow Him. Okay. And Yahweh will reign over them on Mount Zion. Okay. Nobody knows whether it's a building or a mountain or a hill or maybe just a big pile of sand. From that day and forevermore. The word "in" that is written in Micaiah 4 verse 7 is translated from the Hebrew preposition "ba." This word is listed on page 56 of the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Benjamin Davidson, which shows this word means through. The word "mount" that is written in Micaiah 4:7 is translated from the Hebrew word "har." This word is listed on page 365 of volume 1 of the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, which shows this word means house of Yahweh, eminent person, two great scholars or teachers. I would like to ask a question. Does anyone know who the two great teachers are talking about? I can tell you both of them are easily seen here. They're sitting on both ends of the pulpit here, Yahshua and Israel. So that was what that was about. The word Zion, here it is. The word Zion that is written in Micaiah 4 verse 7 is translated from the Hebrew root word zu. That's Zadi, Wa, Hey. Doesn't have anything to do with a zoo of animals. Be sure you know that. This word is listed on page 824 of volume 1 of the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, which shows this word means in its various forms 613 commands, positive and prohibitive, which if you do them are deeds of merit. Let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Reverence Yahweh by keeping all of His laws. That's what this is saying. So what Micaiah 4:7 is saying is this: "And I will make her that was lame a remnant," the woman, "and her that was cast far away a strong nation. And Yahweh will reign over them through the two great teachers at the house of Yahweh, Yahshua and Israel, who are to come." In other words, when he wrote this, neither one of them had come yet. But he knew, like so many prophets, who they were, and of course that they would come someday. Of course, like Daniel, they were told they will come at the appointed time set by Yahweh Himself. Anyway, who are to come. let's do it again. I will make her that was lame a remnant, and her that was cast far away a strong nation, and Yahweh will reign over them through the two great teachers at the house of Yahweh, Yeshua and Israel, who are to come, who will teach those who keep all of his laws from that day and forevermore. If it isn't forever, we don't want it, do we? That's what he's saying here. From that day and forevermore. Many of us here, we met Pastor in various ways. I'm talking about some were business, some were like me, were leasing property from him. But the thing of it is, we realized he had something that even those of us that have a lot of education don't have. Does anybody know what he had that we didn't have? Try it again. Yahweh. I knew about the name Yahweh, but it didn't make any sense to me, or it didn't mean that much to me till I talked to this man, and then I realized he's got something here. That was about 40 years ago, and I'm still here. But I'm not complaining, and I'm not bragging. I'm trying to say I'm very thankful. And we all should be that way. It does say in the scripture, be thankful. So let's go to the next scripture. This pastor told me that he just knew this scripture had something to do with Micaiah 4:7. Take your book of Yahweh and turn to page 818. Page 818. We're going to look at Yochanan 4 verses 20 and 21. Page 818. Now we know the house of Yahweh is where those who keep all of his laws are, because they know to reverence Yahweh, you keep all of his laws. But pastor said, this has something. Well, I looked at it, and boy, did it ever. Verse 20, our fathers worshipped on a mountain, on this mountain. They had a church or something the lady had been going to. But you, Yadaim, or Hebrews, say that in Jerusalem is a place where men ought to worship. Yeshua said to her, woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem, or Jerusalem. You want to get that J in there. You do not know what you worship. And boy, isn't that the truth? 4,200 religions minus one. And they don't know whether they're coming or going or staying, flying, crashing. They don't even know what they're going to eat the next day. We know what we worship, for salvation is from the Yadaim. The word Jerusalem that is written in Yochanan 4:21 is translated from the Hebrew word Yerushalayim. A Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament of Julius I, pages 607 and 1396 through 1397 shows this word not only means Jerusalem, and of course the priest who teaches peace, which you can ask at the South Office or the counselors, and they can find the tapes and or DVDs that tell about that. But it also means to be at an end, to remain in peace, the peaceful solution, to be faithful, complete, to restore, to make right, and the big one, to obey. Servants of Yahweh, to complete, to be united, and able. Now, all of that is in that word. All of that. The word Yadaim that is written in Yochanan 4 verse 22 is translated from the plural form of the Hebrew word Yada. This word is listed on pages 548 and 49 of a Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius I, which shows this word means praised is Yahweh. The Sefer HaShashim, a Hebrew and English lexicon by Selig Newman, page 286, also shows this word means those that give thanks to Yahweh. It's all positive. But this is what Yochanan 4:20 through 22 is saying. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you, Yadaim, say that in Jerusalem is a place where men ought to worship. And Yeshua said to her, woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem, but at Abel, where the servants of Yahweh will unite to complete Yahweh's righteous plan. You do not know what you worship. We know what we worship, for salvation is from those who reverence Yahweh. Brothers and sisters, you are to tell people about the peaceful solution. But remember, we are to tell everyone who the true Savior is. And it's not Mary, a pope, one of those TV preachers. It's Yahweh. Yahweh is salvation. That's what Yeshua's name means. Yahweh is your Savior. We know what we worship. And it's not a what, it's a who. And his name is Yahweh. And you reverence him, brothers and sisters, by keeping all of his laws. And anyone who tells you different, there's no way they can get out of it. They are lying through their teeth. And by the way, make sure you're careful about saying you know more than the priest. I never said that after I came here. When I first met Israel, yeah, that guy's a dope. But when I got to know him, I said, hey, what he does know is what every man who has common sense should know. You serve Yahweh, and he's the one that has been trying so hard. I'm talking about the work he does, how hard he puts his head and his heart into it to teach you how to reverence Yahweh the way that Yahweh is satisfied and pleased, doing that which is pleasing in his sight. And it's not watching some TV preacher tell you to accept Jesus and throw a few coins in the offering box. With that, may I say, may Yahweh bless your understanding of these things. And I turn the services, well, if I get these papers up anyway. There they are. And I turn the service over to great Kohan Ilya Hyler Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, I want to start out in the news by showing how these children that we see in this world, you hear about the disobedience of children and they don't know the causes, and they tell you that we're doing our best to produce better children in this world. And, of course, it's a lie. They're not doing anything to produce a better child. If they were, they would teach them the laws of Yahweh. But it shows how they tested baby food. This things, mothers have children and families have children, and they go to the stores to get baby food. And they tested the baby food, and they found out that 95% of baby food has heavy metals in them, such as mercury and lead. That will totally disable the brain from developing. It will neutralize it in a chemical standard where you don't really see it taking place, but it's taking place, and the results of it's not shown until the child becomes older and you start seeing the results of this poison. 95%. Think about that. That's one reason why we don't do those things. And remember, what's the one thing they tell you not to give an infant? Don't give it honey. Don't do that, but feed it the baby food. It's a system that's against Yahweh in every which way, shape, or form. And then it goes in to show the suicide rate for ages 10 to 24 has rose 56% in the last 10 years. Now, you have children, and think about this. There's children now committing suicide, and one of the main causes is they can't determine whether they're a boy or a girl. They just don't know. Well, if you fed them mercury and lead for the first 2 or 3 years of their life, what do you expect them to do? And they're leading them no direction of hope, but it's a direction of confusion. And then, of course, they feel like odd man out because everybody is confused. And the ones who, and this is, remember, this is unknowingly. Parents poisoning their children with this toxic lead. It's a system that's doing this. And remember, it's the Babylon, this confusion, but a lot of these people, most of these people, not knowing what's going on with them, not knowing how they're being led. And it's this mystery Babylon, this confusion that goes on. And then we get into the opioids. Over 400,000 deaths recorded, and this is recorded as opioids as the cause, many more than that. But they're showing how drug companies have made billions of dollars. Not one person was arrested. They're saying if you shoot someone, you'll go to prison. They'll put you in jail for life. But if you are a big pharmaceutical company or you're a money person, you have a lot of money in the economy, nothing gets done. In fact, you keep your money, they give you a fine, and you leave very wealthy. but nothing's been done. And you listen to the one person, he's a doctor and he's speaking, he says the pharmaceutical business is like every other business. The more product you sell, the more money you make. It's not about making people better, it's about making money. And that's exactly what the Roman Empire is all about, making money, taking control, and eliminating those who they don't think pay them tribute. And then we get into the Syrian, what's going on in Syria, and this is very important. A few speakers before me brought out some things about this, and we're going to try to tie some of this together along with the mark of the beast. And the great Khan Yedidia told me something recently. Made a lot of sense. And he said the mark of the beast is so important because it is the foundational book from which everything else in the house of Yahweh exists. You have to have that to build upon to get everything else, because in that book, Pastor introduces you to Yahweh in the beginning and the Sabbath day, and then he starts explaining why you must come out of this world. It's very important to get these things because this message all is based on this information. Now remember, we showed this. These are supposed to be messengers of peace, and you have the Patriarch Bartholomew, who's from Turkey, Constantinople, and you have Pope Francis. Well, this invasion of Turkey into where the Kurds are at, it's important to understand this, and you're going to see this news article, and this man's going to explain it, but I wanted you to see and make sure you understand. This part in the yellow is the area of the Kurds. The red part is the buffer zone where you see the red stripes. That's the buffer zone Turkey's wanting to push the Kurds out of. And that's the two main cities the Kurds dwell in. They're trying to push the Kurds into the desert, away from the cities. They'll be nothing more than refugees in tents. And then you see this border coming along, the south side in the pink territory. That's where the Syrian army has control. The northern side is the Kurds. Remember, they were funded by the Americans. The thing that divides that, the border you see there, is called the Great Euphrates River. And of course, to the north of that river, all of these are American bases that were there. And you'll see all of these bases, Air Force bases, but you see bases established by the United States north of the Euphrates River, funding the Kurds to push out the Syrian army. Well, why? You see all these little red dots? That's all the oil in Syria north of the Euphrates River. So once Turkey finishes pushing out the Kurds, guess who gets the oil? Don't think Turkey's not following instructions. Don't think they're not doing what they're told. You'll hear President Erdogan say that there's no power that can stop us from doing what we're doing. The United States willfully pulled out, and they let Turkey have control. What country have you ever seen tell the United States what to do? The United States gets their information, they get their instruction from the 7 hills of Rome. I want to read this for you very quickly on page 67 of the Mark of the Beast. It says, the papacy which arose on the separation of the Roman Empire differs from all previous forms of Roman power, that it was an ecclesiastical despotism. Get that word right, despotism. I practiced this before. Despotism, ecclesiastical despotism. Now, it's important to know what that means. That means the exercise of absolute power by the Christian church. So the absolute power by the Christian church ruling now is claiming universal dominion over both spiritual and temporal affairs. That means church and government. They claim full authority, absolute authority over both church and government. And it was a union of the church and state, frequently with the church dominating. They were controlling, they were dominating this part. And if you read over to page 68 at the very bottom, you'll see where Pastor brings out that the Roman masses turned more and more to the colorful, strong, emotional, remember emotional, controlling emotions, and superstitious religions imported from the East. The cults of the great mother Isis and Mithra were the most popular. However, it was Christianity which finally triumphed, controlling this system, controlling this government. Not only religions, but controlling government. The government's being controlled by these religions. You see the United States pull out? Well, they did so very willingly. Think about when have you ever seen that? The United States doesn't pull out unless they're being guided to pull out. They do what they're told to do, and of course they're trying to guard this oil. Hurt not the oil or the wine, that way of living. Now, following all that up, you're going to see President Putin, he finds the need to show the missiles that they have. And notice how they say they can reach America. Remember, when they say can reach anywhere, they're saying the United States of America. But they show their new supersonic missile that the United States cannot combat against, and it is a nuclear missile. And then China does the very same thing. You'll see China come out, and they specifically say, they don't say anywhere anymore, they say the United States. We can hit the United States in 30 minutes. Remember the 1 hour burning that's looking to take place. Watch all of these things come together, and we're seeing a battle for the oil in and around the great river Euphrates, where the United States is controlling the north of the Euphrates River, and you're going to see a nuclear war come from this, and Damascus will cease to be a city. At this time, if we could please play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about Big Pharma being in the news again, seeming like they're getting away with murder, so to speak. War in Syria, and that's continuing, we spoke about in our last broadcast. And Trump's message, actually a letter that he sent to Erdogan regarding that very thing. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about parents hoping to give their children the best nutrition, as most parents want to give their children. A new study has found toxic heavy metals in 95% of baby food. Now, the study put together by Healthy Babies Bright Future also said that those metals can damage a baby's brain development. Testing 168 baby foods, they found lead in 95% of them, arsenic and cadmium in almost 3/4, and mercury in almost 1/3. Now, the group suggests parents avoid giving children rice, cereals, and fruit juices, which were some of the worst offenders.
Well, we've brought you reports on the increase in suicides among those in the military and young people, but a new study revealed suicide rates among young people has increased over 50% in the last decade. Now, these statistics cover the age range of 10 to 24 years old between 2007 and 2017. Now, suicides rose 56% and homicide rates rose between the year 2014 and 2017 as well. Now, Dr. Jennifer Cottle, a family physician and professor at Rowan University, said suicide is not usually caused by one thing. It's caused by a number of factors such as mental health disorders, family abuse, life stressors, social media, bullying, and grappling with gender identity.
Purdue Pharmaceuticals has filed for bankruptcy and reached an agreement with 22 state attorney generals regarding its maleficent and lawsuits. Some attorney generals have cried that it's not enough for some of these billionaires to use bankruptcy to shield their assets and avoid accountability. Also, the proposed deal isn't worth what they say it is and doesn't even require the Sacklers to pay back a dime of the billions of dollars they sucked out of Purdue through the sales of OxyContin.
Well, the opioid epidemic has claimed over 400,000 lives, including 9,000 children who died from exposure to the drug. Now there isn't any talk of jailing the offenders in the case because it's a civil suit, not a criminal case. But the question on a lot of people's mind is, when a big pharmaceutical company puts profits over public safety and their actions result in hundreds of thousands of deaths, shouldn't they face some type of penalty? Well, Patrick McGinley with the College of Law in West Virginia University said, if the criminal law was brought to bear on those responsible, this type of conduct would be unlikely to be repeated.
Right. Well, this is part of the issue with the legal system regarding big companies. For example, when GM put an ignition switch in an area where the driver could inadvertently turn it off, resulting in 124 deaths, the company actively tried to cover this up, even working to derail a recall. Well, what occurred with that? The CEO was grilled by the U.S. Senate, but of course no one went to jail. but GM got fined $900 million and had its production closely monitored by the government for 3 years.
Well, but who took responsibility for the loss of the 124 innocent lives as a result of the flaw? No one. Well, McGinley said there are principals and corporations not only in this country but around the world who escape criminal liability because of the power and money they command. And if the people at the top of the company who are responsible for the opioid epidemic were to be criminally prosecuted, they would think twice or maybe not engage in these activities to begin with.
But for the average Americans, the penalties are not so soft, with the U.S. having the highest prison population in the world, along with the only Western country in the world to still practice the death penalty, along with sentences of life in prison without the possibility of parole handed out all the time for similar crimes as these big companies. The rules seem to be in the U.S. justice system: kill one person in a fit of rage, you're going to jail possibly for life. Kill hundreds or even thousands of people in pursuit of bigger profits, pay a fine, and don't lose any sleep over it.
Wow, hardly seems fair. Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been covering the latest on the Turkish invasion in northern Syria. Now, President Erdogan actually laid down some terms for halting the invasion and what the Kurdish forces that he's fighting against would have to do if to stop the this offensive from Turkey. But Larry McGee has been covering the details. Larry, what is the latest on this situation in Syria that has grown increasingly worse over the years?
Now that the Turkish government has tasted blood, the U.S. and several of its associates, including the Arab League, appear to be having difficulty convincing them to halt and reconsider their intentions with regard to the Syrian Kurds. The same Kurdish population feels as if it's been abandoned and hung out to dry after having apparently outlived its usefulness as a member of the Syrian Democratic Forces that were used by the U.S. to combat ISIS in the region. Turkey has long regarded the Kurdish group, the PKK, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, to be a terrorist group. Now, the U.S. and EU have them listed as terrorist organizations as well, but they are urging restraint and in some cases condemning the actions presently being taken by Ankara to eliminate what it is calling a terror corridor along its border. The controversial operation has been in action for a week, and despite the uproar from the West, President Erdogan has refused to yield and has instead given the PKK an ultimatum to lay down their arms and evacuate the area that they have set up as a questionable safe zone. President Trump is reported to be dispatching a high-level delegation to Turkey this week, with the threat and possibility of heavy U.S. sanctions for non-compliance already on the table. Still, President Erdogan is expected not to budge due to intense fear and distrust. Turkey allegedly sees the Kurdish presence along its border as a threat, and it is a threat that Mr. Erdogan simply no longer intends to ignore. For many analysts and the Kurds, however, President Erdogan's true intentions are quite different from those publicly stated. They believe Ankara is motivated by conquest, and they view the proposed safe zone as an effort to push the Kurds off of choice in key land in order to appropriate and annex those same areas for Turkish use. While it is suspected that the Kurds will fight back with as much verve as they can muster, analysts say they will be no match for the force of the Turkish army, and the end result will be hundreds of thousands of more refugees. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, it seems like the people in Syria just can't catch a break. First, the offensive we saw taking place with the United States and Russia in the country, and I know that they were working to fight against the terrorists there. But then after the United States decides to pull out, now Syria is coming in from the north and dealing Syria another, Turkey's coming in from the north, and dealing Syria another blow.
Right, and as they mentioned there, as Larry was covering, that northern part is really where they have all the big cities where they're very populated. So that would displace, as they said, hundreds of thousands of more people, which has already been very hard on the Syrian population and also the nations around there that are trying to, or at least some of them have tried to help these people. So it puts a whole strain on the whole region.
It sure does. Well, White House officials have confirmed the authenticity of a letter the president sent on October the 9th to President Erdogan of Turkey. The letter is Trump's attempt to reverse Erdogan's decision to invade Turkey, which has already caused the deaths of many U.S.-backed Kurdish fighters in Syria, as well as some Syrian civilians, and raised alarms of a possible genocide.
Well, Trump writes, let's work out a good deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people, and I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy, and I will. Now, the letter concludes with, quote, history will look upon you favorably if you get this done the right and humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool. I will call you later. Sincerely, Donald Trump.
Some strong words there. Well, just 3 days prior to this letter, the two presidents talked on the phone, and as a result, President Trump announced the U.S. would be pulling its troops out of Syria, fully aware of Turkey's plan to enter the country. Well, Republicans and Democrats had just left an unproductive meeting with President Trump in which Nancy Pelosi said it was a meltdown by the President of the United States. So there is definitely disagreement on what the U.S. should do next.
Well, even though President Trump's letter was a severe warning, President Erdogan has not been deterred. In fact, according to the Sky News, the Turkish president does not even want to talk to the Vice President of the United States. So what everyone is actually wondering about is that phone call between Trump and Erdogan, what actually was discussed prior to that letter.
Well, even though the U.S. president had planned to tell Erdogan to stay north of Syria's border, it doesn't seem like he went with the plan. While it's clear the U.S. was made aware of Turkey's plan to begin some type of operation in Syria, it was unclear what stance the president took to begin with.
Well, now just a week after Turkish forces invaded Syria, Vice President Mike Pence brings news of a positive development to the situation. In a news conference, Vice President Pence told reporters, "Today, I'm proud to report, thanks to the strong leadership of President Donald Trump and the strong relationship between President Erdogan and Turkey and the United States of America, that today the United States and Turkey have agreed to a ceasefire in Syria."
Pence explained further, saying, "The Turkish side will pause Operation Peace Spring in order to allow for the withdrawal of YPG forces from the safe zone for 120 hours. All military operations under Operation Peace Spring will be paused, and Operation Peace Spring will be halted entirely on completion of the withdrawal," Pence said.
We'll have to see how that ceasefire works out. A lot of times they don't always go as planned.
Yeah, that's true. We've seen that a lot of times in Israel and the Palestinians.
Well, Vladimir Putin moves closer to his promise of deploying new missile defense systems in 2019. Now, Russia recently performed a test firing of its new high-speed hypersonic missile. President Putin announced the new Vanguard missile system is invincible against today's and future air and missile defense systems of the potential enemy. This is a big success and a great achievement.
Well, military analyst and retired U.S. Colonel Cedric Layton tells CNN, if the weapons work as advertised, there's no current defense against them. Former Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan warned in order for the U.S. to be able to detect the high-speed missile approaching, it would need to improve its radar systems to detecting incoming missiles thousand miles away instead of the hundreds of miles away like they do now.
Well, there have been talks of the Pentagon spending over $1 billion trying to develop its own capabilities. Shanahan had even stated, "We have a number of options going on with hypersonic missiles. While Russia is making significant claims about their missiles, they have yet to prove them," which I'm not sure if you want them to prove what those missiles are capable of doing. But he said, here's what they are saying, though. It's capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, it can fly up to 20 times faster than the speed of sound, and it can adjust altitude and direction to avoid detection. And that's why President Vladimir Putin is saying it's basically invincible.
Yeah, and this is not the first time we've heard higher up in the United States military saying, hey, we don't have a defense against these type of missiles. So, it's kind of a concern with the U.S. military as countries such as Russia, and now we know in the mix China, start to advance their weaponry, because it kind of leaves the United States in a vulnerable place.
Right, and not only do they not have it, the defenses against them, for them to make a defense or build a defense would be years to come. It wouldn't be something that they could do real quick. Right. So, like you said, a lot of analysts have agreed that we're very vulnerable right now to those type of missiles.
Yeah. Well, Colonel Layton says Putin feels incredibly emboldened. Putin believes this is the time to press his advantage. He's put his forces in eastern Ukraine. He's, of course, taken over Crimea. He's now gaining ground in Syria. This is Russia's time, in his view.
Well, the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China was commemorated with a huge military parade. Now, some of the most advanced weaponry in the world was paraded through the streets of Beijing. China unveiled a new range of high-tech weapons to its rivals for the first time.
One of the largest in the pack was the intercontinental ballistic missile. They say it can carry up to 10 nuclear warheads and reach the United States in just 30 minutes. Not much time for warning there. It has a range of 9,000 miles, which is further than any other nuclear missile in the world.
Well, in the Air Force Division, they have a new strategic bomber and their first ever stealth fighter jet, both designed to project power over the Pacific Ocean. But probably the most impressive of all were the weapons of the future. There was the Sharp Sword combat drone. Now, this drone is an unmanned aerial combat vehicle that could eliminate the need for actual piloted fighter jets.
And finally, the supersonic reconnaissance drone, which was designed to locate American aircraft carriers far out in the Pacific Ocean, and a hypersonic missile that flies like a streamlined dart over 5 times faster than the speed of sound. Its speed is so fast that it could certainly penetrate all existing missile defenses used by the West.
Well, you certainly see Russia, China, both of them well advanced in their military capabilities. China there displaying it in the parade almost for the whole world to see. Look, this is what we have. Right. Don't mess with us. Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, basically saying the same thing, that these missiles that we have now, they're invincible. They can't be touched. And as we reported, he's kind of saying, it's our time right now. He's not worried about what anybody else can do. But so as we see these nations preparing for war, we do know that there is one man who continues to prepare for peace and teaches the ways of peace, the laws of Yahweh and the peaceful solution, and that's Yisrayl Hawkins. He teaches a way that is guaranteed to make friends out of enemies and to solve the problems that we see the nations fighting about today. So if you'd like to learn more about the stories you heard today or even other ones, please call, write, or email the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the free Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael programs available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the internet to aid you in studying and understanding your Holy Scriptures and Bible prophecies for this time period. You can find those by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another enlightening and inspiring message from Yisrayl Hawkins, guaranteed to tell you and your family what you can do to protect yourself from the worst time of trouble that's coming upon this earth. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
This time, if everyone would stand, I would like to introduce the door that Yahweh opens that no man can shut. The greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins.
Wow. Hey, everybody's back. Look at this. A full house. Oh, this is marvelous. Yahweh, they're all yours. Praise Yahweh. You have Yahweh's permission to be seated before Him. We've all come before Yahweh and know that His eyes and heart are right here with us. Yahweh's peace be with each and every one of you. The news is pouring in faster than we can cover it right now. I got to get this first. Hope everybody's sitting down and don't fall out of your chair and break your hip. Let me see. I've got to get this, but I need to give you just a little bit of background. The city of 2 billion people called Yisrayl, Texas. Let me read that again for all the disbelievers. You better think, because this is going to take place. You might start investing in it. You've got time to invest in this great city. But the city of 2 billion people, Yisrayl, Texas, that's its name. Spelled Yisrayl. Planets named after the gods. Yehuda, I was hoping he would get to that today, but I've covered him up with work, and we only had to have a little bit of time. But he said he'd probably get to it the last great day. But he's supposed to bring you the names, the original names of the gods. Jupiter was not spelled with a J in the beginning. In fact, most of these sons of Yahweh that was given these cities, these planets to govern. Some of them were sons of Yahweh, as shown in Job or Eob, the book of Eob. They were named, of course, after Yahweh to begin with, many of them, and carried righteous character. This was before they turned, of course, and became snakes and serpents and so forth, like Hillel did. Named Praise Yahweh, well, the same thing with these gods. But the cities, their names were named differently, and of course they were changed. The J was not invented until the 1600s, so it couldn't have possibly been Jupiter. It's been there much longer than 1600, and ruled by by Yahweh and the gods. Not ruled. Yahweh sets in judgment. He gives offices. He sets in judgment of your work, and he tells you you should do this, this, or this. That's his judgment. That's what he's going to be doing with us throughout all eternity, but we're going to be in unity with him. We're not going to fight against him. Praise Yahweh. Yes, a big one. Yisrayl, Texas started with 26 acres of land. and a King James Bible, a King James version of the book of Yahweh. The book of Yahweh is found on Isaiah 34:16. The prophecies, it says, are 100% sure. 100% sure. Now let me read you this. If I told you to count the number of cities, where it says a city, a place guarded by walking or a watch in the widest sense, even of a mere encampment or post. That's the way it started. The King James Version, Strong's, in the following manner, city. How many times you think that would be listed there? I bet all of you have guesses. Everybody sitting down. 1,074. 1074. That's somebody's tag number, isn't it? Isn't that somebody's tag number? 1074, my tag number that Yahweh has used throughout, I want to say throughout all eternity, but at least for thousands of years. He gave it to Abraham and his descendants. The King James Version, of course, was translated from the book of Yahweh, and they invented the letter J in the 1600s to use to deceive the people with the King James Version of the Bible. Now, I'm not condemning the King James Version. I praise that thing. That's where I first learned of Yahweh. But there's a better version. The original is the better, the book of Yahweh. Well, back to the nations now and their fight over the oil. Hurt not the oil. You know about Damascus, Syria, and the sermon, the prophecies that I brought out about Damascus. You might think about getting those sermons and listening to them. War in the Middle East, I think, was one that I brought before that years ago. Michael is going to bring a documentary for you that will cover a bunch of these sermons, several points in the sermons anyway, along with today's prophecies. Let me see this thinking years ago. Instead, it was always held together with very weak band-aids and in an artificial manner. There is, they got the word good, will on both sides, is good on both sides, and really good chance for success. The U.S. has secured the oil, and the ISIS fighters are double secured by Kurds and Turkey. He's talking about the oil in Syria. The Euphrates, this is what divides it. Now, you saw the news there. Here's an article that is not exactly in that news, but it's part of it. Euphrates oil breaks U.S. sanctions on Damascus. The sanctions that were hurting Damascus, they made a trade with their oil and the sanctions now are broken, it says. It breaks U.S. sanctions on Damascus. Remember the prophecy on Damascus. It's going to become heaps of rubble. It is known, well, just a minute. Last winter, Syrian cities and towns were already paralyzed by a crisis of fuel shortage as a result of what some experts believe was caused by international sanctions imposed on Damascus. It is known that the Syrian government uses multiple sources of oil supply to escape international sanctions, including regional and international sources, such as the Iranian, Iraq, and Russian oil. However, the easiest and least expensive source in the Syrian Democratic Force controlled territories, that's Syrian Defense Force controlled territories in eastern Syria, previously controlled by the Islamic State. Well, now we have it. That is, the U.S. has it. The Syrian Defense Force deal with Damascus. Forced step. It was a forced step. Russia now is also included. Russia to play key role in process. This is by a Kurdish official. So you can see, hurt not the oil. It's all about the oil, but this is going to bring about the third part of the people being murdered over that fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. Trump baffles with claim to have taken control of Mideast oil. Trump made the comments twice on Friday, first in a tweet proclaiming the U.S. has secured the oil, and later, while discussing the temporary ceasefire reached between Turkey and Kurdish fighters in northern Syria a day earlier. We've taken control of the oil in the Middle East, he said. The oil we're talking about, the oil that everyone was worried about, worried about for years. The oil that everyone was worried about for years, Trump said during a White House event to mark the first all-female spacewalk, the U.S. has control of that. Go ahead and go about your business. We've taken control of the oil that everyone was worried about. But they haven't completely. And the fight is on for the oil. Okay, you saw that down on the news. The oil along the great river Euphrates. The oil, that oil sits all along the great river Euphrates. That's the oil they were worried about. Jupiter, the universe. It's very important that you understand about the universe. Remember, Catholic means universal. Catholic, the universe, is where the Catholics, or Roman Catholic, Coptic Catholic, got their name. the universe or universal religion was the second tree in the Garden of Eden. Keep those things in mind. And then it was an adversary, still is an adversary, to the tree of life. And that's their persuasion and deception is what turned mankind from Yahweh and the tree of life. Yahweh said, in the last days I will establish my house. In the last days. And he shows the fight is going to be in and around the great river Euphrates, where a third part of the people are going to be killed. In that fourth part of the earth. That's where we are in prophecy. Surely anyone can see that. Even the blinded preachers out there should be able to see this and start rethinking what you're teaching. You need to repent of where you are. You need to come out from among them and be separate. Get yourself to the house of Yahweh. In the last days, he says, he's not going to lie about it. It was shut off in the beginning. It was rejected and shut off. Micaiah 4 says, but in the last days. Genesis 49 shows that. Yes, of the seed of Abraham. Read it. If you can't understand it, give me a call and I'll read it with you and point out the words to you. It's very simple. Life was cut off. No, Yeshua didn't give life to anyone. He didn't save anyone. He didn't send anyone to heaven. Yeshua told you if you don't repent and convert, you're going to burn. You're going to burn in hell. Oh, but I have an immortal soul. You also have a lying tongue. Read Yeshua's words. He said, fear him who can destroy both soul and body. That's your King James Version. In hell fire. Destroy it. Totally. It's going to perish, he said. He said, but blessed are those. Psalms 118, verse 26 says, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. Look it up in the interlinear. The word Yahweh is there. Your blessings, it says, we bless you from the house of Yahweh. That house of Yahweh was planned in heaven, in the heavenly courts, by the way. And Yahweh showed the heavenly courts what he's doing, what he's going to do, and what it's going to bring to help them, to try to turn them away from this kind of life they're following, which is the universal or Catholic religion they're following of killing like Cain, murder, wars. Wars are going on all over the world right now. Yahweh, through his house, through Yeshua, our high priest, and through his house is going to turn this thing around, not in thousands of years from now, but in this 3.5 years, sin is going to stop. When Yahweh showed me this about the planets, I said, I've got to have more information. I went back to college and started studying astronomy again. But Jupiter, the headquarters of the universe and the gods, that's what it is. There's a universe inside, as is shown in gematria. I don't know how deep we got into that today, but it was pretty deep and showing the gods and how they control this universe inside Jupiter. this Jupiter, this universe that Satan was given. She is actually given all of this. And she turned it against mankind. She brought hatred. That's what Genesis 3 shows. She brought hatred between her sons and mankind. So in 6,000 years, a 6,000-year plan, Yahweh is letting the universe or universal religion of fighting and war play itself out. And in this time period, he shows where around the great river Euphrates. I know everyone's got to remember that. I've brought it out so many times that this war is going to be in that fourth part of the earth. Surely there's enough news now to show you where that war is, and the scripture shows where and how many people are going to die there. Well, you're going to be placed over this universe, Jupiter and all, the planets, I would say these many planets are privately owned by some of the gods, privately managed, and they, like Satan, are resisting mankind, showing them the way to peace. What is going on here on earth is also occurring in Jupiter and the other planets that the gods have built for themselves. The building of a planet. This was granted by Yahweh, and he, of course, set the creation, and he lays down the laws. They know they can't break these laws. If they broke the laws of the universe that guides the system that we see from the earth, that guides this, if they broke these laws, they know, they fully understand that they could put the heavens into a destructive route where one would destroy the other or a million others. So, but they're also guarded. Yahweh is not taking any chances with the universe being destroyed, but he does show a war in heaven that's going to take place in this time period. The heavens will melt with fervent heat. He shows that, along with the earth. So the wars that are taking place are going to take place here on planet Earth is also taking place in heaven. They got an uproar there, as Yahweh told them they would have. And he also told them the way out of it, but they rejected him. They don't want anyone telling them what to do. That's a character of Satan that she brings over to mankind. This future of mankind, it started, the future of mankind, the future of the house of Yahweh, where you now sit, started in Genesis 1:26 with the plan of Yahweh revealed. I'll make man in my image. And then the very next verse, verse 27, said he made man in his image. Yes, Yahweh, by himself, he made mankind by himself. And he gave mankind the opportunity to live forever right then. If you notice today in the hidden codes, they were bloodless. They developed the blood as they sinned. This brought defilement to the body. And of course, the body had to start building to push it out of the body. And the blood is what cleanses the body, the sin, the filth, the defilement. The blood cleanses that and pushes it out through different channels. Well, that was proven by Gematrix that was given to the Yahmatrix, which was given to Abraham. Genesis 49, we see another prophecy there from 1 to 10. The great patriarch calling his sons together and saying, this is what the end is going to be. I would ask all the preachers out there that are hearing me now to read that chapter, because not one of them will fail. And he said, this is exactly what it's going to be in the last days. In the last days I will establish my house, and it shows Yeshua and the branch. Yeshua and the branch there. The donkeys, the 12 donkeys tied to Yeshua, the donkey's colts, which are you, tied to the branch in these last days, but in the last days. Yeshua was 2,000 years ago training his donkeys who wrote the books in book 2 that they call the New Testament, trying to make out like an Old Testament was done away with and a new one given to you to go ahead and sin and war and fight, and they call it just wars and so forth, and they're still calling it that. and they're still recommending that they go to war, be like the first beast. That's what the Roman Catholic Church, the universal church, coming from the gods, Genesis 3 verse 5, that Yahweh said, Satan says, follow the gods, be evil like the gods. It's more suitable. Surely you won't die. Go ahead and follow them. In Genesis 49, 1 through 10, we see this prophecy for the last day. The very first verse of that chapter said, here's their last days, what you're going to bring by worshiping gods. In the last days I will establish my house, but not before. In the last days, Yeshua said, is the days of when mankind will invent and have nuclear bombs that can burn the earth in 1 hour. That's the last days. Matthew 24. And in that same generation, Yahweh showed his house would be established in the last days. And we will stop war. That's what Micaiah 4 verses 1 through 3 show. The house of Yahweh is the one that brings forth Yahweh's ways, and it will stop war not only here, but in Jupiter. Yeah. And throughout the God planets. Psalms 110, you've got to read that one for sure. And you can keep this one in your mind, that till the last great day, this last great day is going to be really filled with information, even more so than what we brought out during the feast. But here in 110, this is speaking of you now. This is speaking of the house of Yahweh that I will establish in the last day, with Yeshua as high priest, Hebrews 10:21, teaching the laws, Hebrews 10:16, encouraging you to not forsake the assembling of yourselves together, as the manner of some is, and so much the more as you see this day approaching. this day of nuclear burning. Praise Yahweh. Well, Psalms 110 and verse 1 said, Yahweh said to my ruler and king, that's Yahshua Messiah he's talking to, our high priest, who is having his say right now in Jupiter, having his say concerning the house of Yahweh, every individual holding you up to them, knowing that in the end they're going to accept his word, they're going to accept this dominion that Yahweh is giving you. That's this great dominion that was given to Hillel, his wife. This great dominion over all the planets of the earth, she was placed. Such great dominion. It's not a little thing that you're going to get, that you're going to be placed over. This dominion that you're going to get, brethren, that will last throughout all eternity, is an ever-ruling, never-ending government. That's what it says. It will never end. It is forever. Yahweh said to my ruler and king, Yahshua Messiah, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Well, sitting at his right hand, if you studied this out, it'd take you several sermons to bring it, but that's what Yahshua is doing. He sits at Yahweh's right hand in authority among the gods. And he's bringing forth you. I set before you this day heaven and earth. That's in Deuteronomy 30. I understand this, he said. I've set before you heaven and earth. Well, Yahshua is your high priest. You wouldn't get anything there if he wasn't. But Yahshua is your defense attorney. Yahshua is your high priest, which is defense attorney for you, arguing your case and what you're overcoming. My job is to help you overcome and say, Yahshua, did you see this? And the important thing is you are overcoming. And you're learning to be a servant, not a shooter, a servant to the people. Learn how to please them. I say it all the time. I just want you to be satisfied. Well, that's what I want on a righteous manner. I want you to be satisfied with it, and I'll hold you up to Yahshua and to Jupiter. They will accept you. In fact, they're anxiously waiting, the apostle said, for this dispensation that will come from you, this great authority that's going to be given to you. And they know full well that Satan had this, and Satan, that is, before she became the snake and the serpent and so forth, as describes her character right now, and against mankind. Well, they know she had that authority. In fact, it was only recently that she was asked to go to earth and see what she could do to turn this around. Her only thoughts are, her only thoughts are here on earth is to destroy everybody that is not Catholic. You know, she had it all Catholics to begin with, and where did it go? Think of that. That was the only religion on earth. And Cain was the Pope that took the just wars, the just fighting, and went to the ends of the earth with it. And of course, that one religion is still leading, as prophecy showed it would in Genesis 49. It's still leading the world. Yada, the sons, the 12 tribes of Israel, Yada has his hand on the neck of all of his enemies. You just saw it. I just read it to you right here. It's called oil. It's called sanctions. It's called let us be like the first beast, who had all these wars and did live. And now today she's worse off than ever. She's got all nations fighting against nation, all religions fighting against religion. And these are all God-worshiping religions. She's tried to pull the House of Yahweh in, but had no success. Well, make your enemies, Yahweh is going to make the enemies of Yeshua his footstool. That's also shown in Genesis 49. The man riding the donkey. Yahweh will send the rod of your strength. And now, you know, that's Malachi 4 shows you the strength of Yahweh is his laws, statutes, and judgments. He will send it out of Zion. You will rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people will have proved themselves, that's you, the house of Yahweh. In the last days I will establish my house. Psalms 23 says it's forever, forever. I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. There's no end to it. Your people will have proved themselves to be obedient to the laws on the day that you go forth in power. That's when Yeshua goes forth, so will you. They will unite with you, arrayed in holy garments, like the morning dew. They will completely cover the earth, growing with you. Remember also the white linen. You've already covered that this morning. It would be great to cover it again. Yahweh has vowed an oath and will not relent, nor change his mind. It's a perfect way. Why would he change his mind? You are a priesthood forever after the order of Melchizedek. Yes, after the order of Melchizedek, a righteous king. The rulers and kings at your right hand, O Yahweh, will strike through. This is a little bit mistranslated. The word wrath there is judgment. Great David Yehuda has brought that many times. They will execute judgment. That's what you will be doing. You know, this was the job that was given to Hillel. The only thing, she turned from righteous judgments to deadly judgments, calling it just war. They will execute judgment among the nations. They will fill the earth with baptized beings. Yes, they will actually fill the earth with baptized. They got it. This was a little bit mistranslated. But they will rule like Yahweh. They won't lift up sword against anyone. They will show them the right way to go, and just as Yahweh does. And they will show them the history of their ancestors who went the wrong way. That's what you're going to do. The one who bestows succession will set them on their thrones that Yahweh Himself will exalt them. We've run out of time, but if you'll mark your place 110, and we will take up there when we continue. The job that we have, brethren, is enormous. The position that you will hold, it is really enormous. But you will do it. You have a subconscious mind that's busy storing knowledge for you right now. It's also storing righteous knowledge. It won't be forgotten. It's a mind that never forgets. You have a tiny record in the back of your head that can't even be burned. Yahweh can resurrect mankind and put him back in the same person that he was before he died. There's no showing anywhere that Yahweh made Satan's body. He created Satan's body, Hallel's body. There's no sign that any of those beings, including Yahweh's first sons, can be resurrected and put back to where they were. When they die, they're dead. That's it. On the second death, that will be taken away. That it will not be able to resurrect anymore. The second death, you don't want. The first death, Yahweh can put you back like you were. He's giving you that power to put others back. You're going to be resurrecting the dead. That means taking that body, that evidence, from the dust of the earth, wherever you're buried, bring that to a certain place, recreate the tissues, the brain, exactly like it was with the memory and the information it had in the memory. He'll bring that back and put it exactly like you were, and it will be like you went to sleep and woke up immediately if you died. Now, our ancestors who Yahweh seems fit to resurrect, and he makes that judgment from the heart of the person. We will resurrect them also, and we will give them 100 years to live. Those who didn't live through this part right here, they'll have 100 years to live, and they will be judged from that 100 years, along with everyone at the last of the millennium. They will be resurrected, some of them, not all. Daniel shows that some, they'll all be resurrected, but only some will be given that 100 years to prove themselves like you're doing now. But Yahweh does take care, and he does it righteously. He doesn't force anyone. He's asking for volunteers only to be in unity with him. Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!